with my college football schedule preview and point spread prediction videos today. I'll be doing the Texas Longhorns. Texas's schedule, I would say, is tough because it's an SEC schedule, but I would actually say that it's one of the easier SEC schedules. So their non-conference schedule, I have to say, is tough because they have a road game against Ohio State, and then they do get to play three pretty much given wins, which is nice. Right after that, so they'll be playing their whole non-conference schedule before they play a conference game. But the road game against Ohio State is really about as tough of a start to the season as that you could have, because not only is Ohio State going to be a really good team, Columbus, Ohio has got to be in the top five of the toughest places to play in all of college football. Other than against Michigan, they haven't lost there in 4 years. And their non-conference schedule, I would have to say, is tougher this year than last year, because even though they played Michigan last year, and I know Michigan beat last year's Ohio State team that I think was better than this Ohio State team is going to be. That was, I think, just because Michigan owns Ohio State, and this Ohio State team, I think, is going to be better than last year's Michigan team was. San Jose State, I know, is not a bad group of five team. So they may be able to keep it close with Texas for a quarter, meaning it may not be a 55 to nothing type of game, but UTEP and Sam Houston will be a 55 to nothing type of game, I think, if not worse. UTEP is a terrible group of five team, and Sam Houston's an FCS team. So they get their first bye week before a road game against Florida. And I don't think this is a good spot for it because even though Florida is a tough place to play and they'll probably be an okay team, so this may be a competitive game. They play three really just given wins right before that. If I was a Texas fan, I would have rather have seen them have their first bye week in between Florida and the rivalry game against Oklahoma, because Oklahoma, I know last year was not very good and got blown out by Texas, but in that first quarter, their defense shut down Texas's offense to where they actually had a 3-0 lead after the end of the first quarter, but then their defense got tired, and they ended up losing at 34-3 because their offense couldn't hardly even move the ball. And this year, with John Mateer playing quarterback instead of that Michael Hawkins that was playing in that game last year, who was about as bad as it gets at the quarterback position, and with the offensive line having more experience, they should be able to score more against Texas this time because Texas's defense dominated them because their front seven was really good and Oklahoma's offensive line was so bad. And that could also mean with an improved Oklahoma offense, less points for Texas this time. But that means that it'll probably be more like a normal Red River game. But I will probably still pick Texas to win this one. And then they have to play two road games in a row, which you never want to have to do. But if you do have to do it, Texas got it good because they play Kentucky and Mississippi State, who were the two worst teams in the SEC last year. They combined for one conference win last season. And Kentucky, though, might be better because they've got a coach that, has usually had at least a decent team, and he's a pretty good coach when it comes to the line of scrimmage. But Mississippi State, I'm pretty sure, will, if not the worst team in the conference again, will be one of the worst teams in the conference. And then them getting to play Vanderbilt after that should make a pretty easy three in a row. But Vanderbilt did almost upset Texas last season. And then they get their second bye week at a perfect time, right before a road game against Georgia, which might be the biggest game in the SEC this season, besides the conference championship, because it's a rematch of the conference championship from last season. And Georgia will at least be the second best team that Texas plays in the regular season, I would think. And this should be at least the second toughest game on Texas's schedule. And Texas better have rebuilt their offensive line better than Georgia will have rebuilt their defensive line, or Texas is probably going to be in trouble in this one because Georgia's defensive line is what won them both of those games against Texas last season. And I am really doubtful, but I'm not going to say it's impossible that Texas wins both Ohio State and Georgia on the road. But I do think there's a good chance that they could lose both of those games. And then Arkansas in what's really a rivalry game because it's an old rivalry that's been brought back. So I watched this game last year, and even though Texas's offense had an off day in uh, this one last season, their front seven controlled the game. They dominated Arkansas's offensive line to where it didn't matter that Arkansas had a really good offensive coordinator and a 6'6" dual threat quarterback, and they're going to have both of those things again this year. But for Arkansas to have any chance of pulling this upset, their offensive line is going to have to be better because Texas returns a whole lot in the front seven of their defense and also in their whole defense. So then Texas A&M in the uh, other rivalry game. I've been high on Texas A&M's new quarterback Marcel Reed, but that's not because of how he played against Texas last season. Texas's defense shut him down to where the only points that A&M had was a pick six. And I know A&M's defense played well too. They only gave up 17 points, but Texas, I would lean their way in this game because I know they do lose some really good players. Alfred Collins on the defensive line, and then they lose Jahade Barron at cornerback and Andrew Maguba at safety. Three really good players, but other than that, pretty much everybody else that started last year on their defense comes back, and they had a lot of depth last season. So now for the point spread prediction. Games in the green are games where I think that Texas will be favored to win by a blowout, 20 or more points, and there's four of those: San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston, and Mississippi State. Games in the blue are games where I think Texas will be favored to win by double digits at 10 to 19 points, and there's four of those: Florida, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas. Games in the purple are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a touchdown, at 6 to 9 points, and there's one of those: Texas A&M. Games in the pink are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a field goal at 1 to 5 points, and there's one of those: Oklahoma. Games in the gray are games where I think Texas will be about a field goal underdog at 1 to 5 points, and there's two of those: Ohio State and Georgia. So San Jose State, the spread in that one may be like 40 points, but the spread in the UTEP and Sam Houston games will be 50 plus points, I'm pretty sure. And Mississippi State, Texas should be favored in that one by like 25 points. And Florida, I think Texas will be favored by a couple of touchdowns, maybe 14 points. And then Kentucky, I think the spread in that one will be around 17. And Vanderbilt, I'll say Texas will be favored by about 14 points because it was close last year. But I wouldn't be surprised if that one even ended up being a green game. And Arkansas, I guess I'll say the spread will be about 10 points because it's a rivalry and it was competitive last year. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Texas ended up being more than a two touchdown favorite in that one. I think they're more than 10 points better than Arkansas is. And Texas A&M, I'll say Texas will be a 7 point favorite in that one, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being in the blue because I could see Texas when it comes time to it being as much as a 10 point favorite over Texas A&M. And Oklahoma, that one is in the pink because of the rivalry. But I think Texas will be favored by around 5 points. And Ohio State, that one's in the gray because it's a road game, and Ohio State just won a national championship and just beat Texas in a playoff game. So Ohio State, I'll say, will be a 3 point favorite in this one, but no more than that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's just by a point or two. And then Georgia, because it's a road game, that one's in the gray, but I think they'll just be favored by a point or two. Texas, I think, would be favored at home and maybe even on a neutral field. But I would say that Texas's ceiling is 12-0 and that their floor is 10-2 because other than Ohio State and Georgia, I would be shocked if they lost anything else. Because I am high on Arch Manning. I think he's going to do a really good job for them at quarterback this season. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.